People are represented, jury is not present. Counsel, anything we need to take up before we invite the jurors to join us? All right, let's have the jury, please. All right, let the record reflect we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Weir, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right. Good afternoon again, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Mr. Neufeld.
Dr. Weir, just so we can explain these fractions a little bit to the court and to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for instance, taking item number 29, when I show that fraction 1 over 2, doesn't that mean that approximately 50% of the population could not be excluded as a potential contributor to the mixture reflected on the steering wheel stain? Is that what 1 over 2 means?
That's what that says. It doesn't allow us to interpret the mixture, however.
But that is what it says, sir. Is that correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Thank you. Now, what I'd like you to do, sir, is I'm going to also ask you to do, using the same approach that we utilized for item 29, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing for item 303, which is 304 and 305 as well as G10. And to do that, sir, again, referring to the databases that you received in this case, the database from Cellmark, and then the database for D1S80.
Excuse me, Mr. New, I have used FBI's data on the polymer, on the PCR.
On the D1S80, but I also showed you, as you may recall, Cellmark's tables for the data on DQ alpha. Is that correct?
That's right. So we're not only doing different calculations, we're using different databases.
All right, well, where's that sign? Remember that the DQ alpha calculations that you relied on for arriving at that NRC number was defendant's 1201. I'll just show it again to you to refresh your recollection, sir.
Yes, your calculations are Cellmark databases and mine are FBI.
Okay. But I think you said, frankly, that it shouldn't make much difference, or the difference should be rather minimal for these DQ alpha frequencies, whether one uses the FBI's database or the Cellmark database. Is that correct?
They won't be greatly different, but they won't be the same.
Okay. But Since we already did the calculation for item 29 using Cellmark's database, and since Cellmark did report DQ alpha typing results in this case, I'm going to ask you to use Cellmark's table again. And then, of course, for the D1S80, you would use the FBI's databases, since Cellmark doesn't have any databases for D1S80. Item 303, 304, and 305 has been typed, has it not, referring to People's Exhibit 260, both on the DQ alpha locus and also on the D1S80 locus. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So one could So if one wanted to answer the question, that is the same question that is posed in the NRC report, which is what percentage of the population cannot be excluded as being a potential contributor to this mixture, namely the mixture on the console of 303, 304, and 305, one could make certain calculations and generate certain sums for the DQ alpha locus, and then again for the D1S80 locus, and then you would combine those. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, you've just pointed out to me, in fact, that we didn't do that, of course, here. We've only done the one locus. My figures are on all the loci. Yours are just on the one locus.
For the 303, 304, and 305 there.
The 303, 304, and 305 is typed at DQ alpha and D1S80. The figures I've given are typed based on both loci. You've only given half the story.
Okay.
So it's even more misleading than I had realized.
Well, on item 29, there is only one locus. Isn't that correct? I'm sorry, right. There are polymarkers in the DQ alpha locus. Isn't that right?
That's right. So
But-
there are 6 loci.
But
And I've given a 6 locus result, and you've given a 1 locus result.
Well, excuse me, sir, but for item 29, isn't it true that the polymarkers do not discriminate, the polymarker results themselves?
I'm not sure that's true. Let's just go and look.
Well, let me ask you the question specifically, sir. Isn't it true that 100% of the population is reflected in those polymarker results alone?
I think finally we've put our finger on our main difference. To calculate the frequency of a mixture, I take the mixtures of people, and in the correct method that does not sum to 100%. Your method does, so we've got them on the same piece of paper.
Right.
We're talking about very different things.
I'm not talking about my method, so I'm talking about the NRC method, Dr. Weir, and what I'm asking you is, applying the NRC method to item 29, would you agree that there's no one in the population who could not be included or who wouldn't be included as a potential contributor to the polymarker profile that you see for item 29?
I think that's the point. That's why it's so absurd.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And would you agree, sir, that the one genetic system where there is some portion of the population who would be excluded is for the DQ alpha system in item 29?
Only if you mean excluded, meaning single people. For the mixtures, of course, we've got several people.
Right, I'm talking about single people who could be excluded, saying that there are some people who just could not have been a contributor to this mixture.
Is that so the question is, I think I'm agreeing with you, yes.
Okay, fine. Now, here's what I'm asking you, sir. For items 303, 304, and 305, if we use that NRC method and we use the D1S80 databases from the FBI, and we use the DQ alpha databases that Cellmark used in doing their own calculations, for 303, 304, and 305, this would be 1209. So just to remind you of what's up on the screen at this point, we're looking at the genotypes for the bronchoconsole stains, 303, 304, and 305. And,
Fine.
okay? And the DQ alpha profile that's seen in that mixture is a 1.1, a 1.3, and a 4, and there may or may not be a 1.2 there. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And now to the frequencies and the sums of the frequencies for the Caucasian, African American, and Hispanic databases that I present on that table that you're looking at now correctly give you the aggregate, the sum, for the various matching genotypes that are consistent with that mixture for an individual.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like you've listed all the possible genotypes because every genotype could be in that mixture.
Right.
Is that, am I correct? This looks like a complete listing of all the 10 genotypes.
Yes.
So I'm puzzled as to why the frequencies don't add up to 100%. I must be missing something.
Okay. Yeah, because there are some alleles in the system, if you may recall from your review of how the system functions, like allele 2, allele 3. Do you remember that, sir?
Is this a question? Are you testifying, or are you asking a question?
Well, I'm asking, I'll rephrase it as a question for the witness. Do you recall in your discussion of the systems with Mr. Sims that there are more alleles in the system than alleles that are present in this mixture?
Yes, I do, and that's what I
Okay.
had forgotten. Thank you.
Right. All right. So when you then look at the frequencies reflected in the cell mark tables for the genotypes that are present in that mixture, are the numbers reflected on defendant's
1209.
1209 accurate?
The one on the screen now?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. Now what I'd like to do is show you what will be defendant's 1210. And in 1210, we were told that there are 3 possible alleles present in the D1S80 system. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. And the various genotypes that could comprise those 3 alleles, 18, 24, and 25, are reflected in the first column. Is that right?
That's right.
And if we were to sum up all the possible genotype frequencies that could be part of that mixture, you would arrive at the numbers that we have on that last line titled sum for the 3 different racial databases. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's right, yes.
Okay. Now, if you wanted to then look at what is the frequency of the population who could not be excluded as a potential contributor to this mixture, both on the D1S80 level and the DQ alpha level, you would then have to combine the frequencies from those 2 different loci. Is that correct?
That's true.
And, sir, where's that page? Now I will show you defendant's 1211. And does defendant's 1211 now reflect the combined frequencies of the DQ alpha system and the D1S80 system for those 3 databases as I've just described?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And would you agree, sir, that if we simply look at the most common frequency of people who could be included as contributors to that mixture, of those 3 databases, what is the most common?
It looks like 1 and 4.
Okay. So what we're saying, sir, is that given the mixtures that we see, just looking for the black. was just considering what percentage of the population cannot be excluded as being a contributor to the mixtures reflected on the bloodstains on the console using that NRC method as we see it up there would be approximately 1 in 4. Is that correct?
Right.
And what that says when you say 1 in 4, that means approximately 25% of the population, if you simply type them at random, they would come out with genotypes for these two systems that would be included or consistent with the profile seen in that mixture on the console. Is that correct?
Well, included but not consistent. The profile is a mixture of more than one
I understand,
person.
but you wouldn't be able to exclude 25% of the population approximately.
No, I don't think you would want to do that calculation, but you're quite right.
Thank you. And now, finally, for that last item, sir, G10, which is the stain on the glove. Again, the DQ alpha profile for that one for the DQ alpha mixture would be reflected on defendant's 1209, would it not? Because you have, again, the 1.1, the 1.3, the 4, and you may or may not have the 1.2.
It's just the same as the previous one, yes.
Same numbers, right? Same
Right.
frequencies, fine. And now, for the D1S80 frequencies, we're instead of seeing 3 alleles present, you only see 2. Is that correct?
That's right.
The 24 and the 25.
That's right, yes.
Now I'll show you what we'll mark 1210, I believe.
1211.
1211. 1212.
12.
And what you see in the first column of 1212, sir, are the various genotype combinations that could go into that mixture. Is that correct?
Yes, the genotypes along with their frequencies, and they seem to be fine.
And those frequencies are correct.
I think so.
Okay. And then we have the sums of those frequencies at the bottom.
That's right.
Now, once again, for this stain, if you wanted to take the same approach that we did for 303, 304, and 305, you would then combine the frequency for the D1S80 locus with the frequency from the DQ alpha locus. Is that correct?
Right.
And now I'd like you to take a look at 1213. Okay, and on 1213, sir, have we done just that? Have we combined the frequencies for each of these genotype sums, both for Caucasians, African Americans, and Hispanics?
That's right, yes.
Now, of these 3 databases, what is the most common frequency of individuals who cannot be excluded as having contributed to a mixture such as this profile?
Well, it's about 1 in 20.
Well, isn't it for Caucasians 1 in 10?
Oh, excuse me. Right, yes, 1 in 10. I was looking at the wrong ones. Yes, that is 1 in 10.
And so if the question was, Dr. Weir, what percentage of the population would be included as potential contributors to this mixture on the glove, if that was the question being posed, the answer would be 1 in 10. Is that correct?
Right.
The ink's running out, Your Honor.
I think I have some new ones in the red cup down here. Mr. Neufeld. Try the red cup there.
This one back so it doesn't get recycled.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And so with regard to that last fraction, 1 in 10, what you're saying is, sir, that if we looked at the entire population, that approximately 10% of that population would have genotype frequencies which would be includable or represented in that mixture on stain G10. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Dr. Weir, Dr. Weir, when you failed to take into account in your calculations last week, was it that when you see the 1.3 and the 4 alleles in a mixture, that you don't know whether the 1.2 allele is there or not? Is that correct?
That's what gave me the problems, yes.
Now, when you, one second. I believe you also said that before you would undertake all these statistical calculations, you wanted to be absolutely sure of what these mixtures meant, and that's why you contacted Mr. Sims. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Well, sir, do you realize as you sit here today that just as the presence of the 1.3 and I'm sorry, withdrawing. Do you realize as you sit here today, Dr. Weir, that just as when you have the 1.3 and 4 allele, you can't tell whether the 1.2 is there or not, that same phenomena occurs if you have a mixture and the 1.1 and the 4 allele are present? Are you aware of that, sir?
I'm not aware. I'm not sure we have a profile like that in this case.
Well, let's look at item 29 again, Dr. Weir.
All right.
Do you have the original notes? Dr. Weir, let me have marked for identification. Should we have 3 pages? Sure. 3 pages of Selmark's notes.
$12.14.
This will be collectively 1214, Your Honor.
Right, why don't you staple them together so they don't get lost?
Dr. Weir.
Why don't you show that to Mr. Clarke
Sure.
so he knows what pages we're talking about here? Mr. Neufeld, proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Weir, there's already been testimony in this case that Selmark's number 19 is their internal number for LAPD item 29, the steering wheel. I'd like to show you what has been marked as defendants 1213, 1214, and show you their notes, and show you their comments and their characterization of the typing for DQ alpha on their number 19, which is the steering wheel. Now, in the Cellmark Laboratory notes, sir, for their DQ alpha typing of the steering wheel, do not they say that it is a 1.1, a 4, and a possible 1.2?
Objection, foundation at this point.
Sustain.
Before you commence to do your statistical work on Cellmark's data in this case, did you take it upon yourself to learn how the data should be interpreted?
Objection, vague as to vague.
For the interpretation of the mixtures on this item specifically, I used the chart and evidence. I have not seen these pages before.
Are you aware of the fact, Dr. Weir, that any time there is a 1.1 and a 4 allele present, the 1.2 might also be masked? Are you aware of that?
Objection, misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
Also beyond the scope and no foundation.
Sustain. Foundation.
Well, let me present you Dr. Weir, when you calculated the frequencies for the mixture on the steering wheel, did you assume that the 1.2 allele was not masked?
Objection, same objection.
Overruled.
My calculations were based on the chart, which shows that it was present.
So
On both DOJ and Cellmark, I saw the same pattern from both laboratories. I assumed that they were correct and made that calculation.
So are you saying, sir, that when you did your calculations on the steering wheel, you assumed in that calculation that the 1.2 allele was not masked, but was actually present?
It's stated here has been present from both laboratories, so I assume it's present.
Okay. And sir, would you agree, if in fact a 1.2 allele could equally be masked whenever the 1.1 and 4 are present, as you've already acknowledged it is when the 1.3 and 4 is present, would that also change your frequency estimates?
Objection, assumes facts not in evidence, also misstates the evidence.
Sustain. Rephrase the question.
If you were to learn, sir, that when you have a 1.1 and a 4 allele present, as you do on the steering wheel,
To the council, I want you more clearly frame that as a hypothetical question.
okay? Well, all right. Assume for the moment the hypothetical, sir, that whenever you see a 1.1 and a 4 allele in a mixture, you can't be sure whether the 1.2 is there. Just want you to assume that.
Is there some evidence that I should assume that from these two reports?
So I'm just asking you to assume that. Would you assume that for the next question I'm about to ask you?
I'm going to object, it's an improper hypothetical at this point.
Overruled.
Can you assume that, sir?
Oh, I can assume anything. I don't think it's going to impact my analysis.
Okay. Well, if you assume for the moment that whenever you have the 1.1 allele and the 4 allele present in this hypothetical, that you don't know whether the 1.2 allele is present. In that hypothetical, if you then calculated the frequencies for the mixtures on the steering wheel, would you arrive at frequencies that are more common than those frequencies that you arrived at either in your Friday calculations or in your Monday morning calculations?
Objection, no foundation, also assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
The way you've described this hypothetical sounds to me like the situation we've already discussed, the 1.3 and 4.
That's correct.
If that's the fact, and I have no knowledge one way or the other, if that was the case and that was ignored, then that would affect the results, certainly.
And sir, would that also affect the results in such a way that your calculations on the steering wheel would again be statistically biased against Mr. Simpson?
Argumentative. It's argumentative. Rephrase the question.
Well, would you agree, sir, that if that condition in the hypothetical was correct, then the statistics that you've articulated to this jury, both last week and this morning, would incorrectly state the frequencies in such a way as to make them seem more rare than they really are?
Yes, that's true.
Ask that this be marked, we're at 1215, which is the Amplotype User's Guide.
12:15.
You do have an objection to the foundation.
All right. Well, you can show it to him, see if he knows what it is.
I want you to take a look at this page. It begins here and ends here. Okay, just read it carefully. This and then this table.
I've read this.
Okay. Now, having read that document, okay, sir, would you agree that apparently, given the construction of this DQ alpha test,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Objection beyond the scope of this witness's expertise.
Foundation, sustained.
sir, have you ever, before you did any calculations in this case, you said that you spoke to Gary Sims and you attempted to learn the limitations of this system. Is that correct?
Yes, I've asked him to confirm that the results on the charts are accurate, and he confirmed that they were. I've not seen this document before.
May the record reflect the witness is referring to the
12:15. Yes.
No, excuse me.
Sir, plain and simple, wouldn't you agree that you've also made another mistake on your calculations for item 29?
Objection argumentative, also asked and answered.
Argumentative. Phrase the question.
Sir, as you sit here today at this moment on the witness stand, did you make a mistake in your calculations for item 29?
No, I didn't. This is the first time I've seen this document, and it says here, apparent heterozygous type 1.1 and 4. If we see that apparent, meaning that's what we see, that apparent type may have a 1.2. The evidence presented to me quite clearly states a 1.1, 1.2, 4 mixture. It does not show a 1.14 mixture.
Dr. Weir, before you did your calculations in this case, had you ever even looked at a DQ alpha strip?
Objection, no. Also beyond the scope of the record.
I have not looked at a DQ alpha strip at all, ever. As I've said repeatedly, my analysis starts with what the forensic scientists tell me in general, and in particular what's written on these charts.
But, sir, don't you think it's important as a statistician who's relying on someone else's data that you first learn what the limitations of that system is in terms of ambiguities?
I don't have enough time to learn all of the molecular biology. I must analyze data presented to me. If a reputable forensic scientist says this is the data, that's what I analyze. I can't do everything. I've been very careful, I hope, to explain I'm not a molecular biologist. I must rely on what's told to me.
Well, sir, wouldn't you agree then, at least in the hypothetical that I gave, if in fact, when you have a 1.1 allele and a 4 allele present in a mixture, if in fact you can tell whether the 1.2 is there or not, if that was true in the hypothetical, wouldn't that mean that your statistical frequencies for item 29 understate the true frequency of that profile?
Objection, no foundation.
It's the hypothetical.
And also is beyond the scope of the record.
The hypothetical is as you've described, but it's not consistent with what I have in front of me.
But as the hypothetical as I've described it to you, sir, would mean that your frequencies once again would be in error, correct?
Objection, argument.
Sustained.
Well, the hypothetical, as I've explained it to you, would mean once again that your frequencies understate.
Sustained. Rephrase the question, Counsel.
Okay. Yeah. Well, accepting the hypothetical as I've given it to you, wouldn't that mean, or I'm sorry, would that mean that the frequencies of occurrence would be more common than those that you testified to previously?
Abstentions.
I assume this is the last time we're going to ask this.
On that, yes.
My results, which I believe are correct, are based on the assumptions of the data being as it is. I have been very careful. I've given you the answer for the profile in front of me. That is not the answer for a profile not in front of me.
Sir? So please, all I'm asking is that you answer the question. If in fact,
Sustained.
Objection, Your Honor.
Right.
Move to strike
Sustained.
counsel's comments.
Sustained.
if in fact the condition I put into the hypothetical is correct, would you agree that the frequencies that you've testified to here for item 29 are in fact less common than what they actually would be?
If I calculated frequencies under one assumption when the other one was true, then I would be misstating them,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Now, the methods that you employed in this case in calculating the frequencies of these mixtures, have you ever testified to those methods in any other criminal case involving DNA evidence before this one?
No, I haven't.
To your knowledge, Dr. Weir, has any other expert in the United States ever used your approach that you used with this jury to calculate the frequencies in a mixture in a forensic DNA case?
I believe Dr. Stoney in Chicago uses these calculations. I'm not sure whether he's testified. He's certainly written about them.
But
He's
you're-
the scientist in this country, and there are scientists outside of this country who use that method.
Okay, once again, sir, to your knowledge, has anybody, any expert anywhere in the United States of America ever testified in a court of law in a criminal case applying the methods to calculating mixture frequencies that you've testified to in this case?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
I think whether I know it or not is not really the point.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I would ask
Yes.
that the witness be instructed to answer the question.
Dr. Weir, are you aware of any such testimony?
I'm not aware of any, sir.
Next
Thank you.
question.
And I believe you said that the California Department of Justice relies on the FBI database for its RFLP numbers. Is that right?
That's true.
And that you said you've consulted the FBI since 1989.
That's true.
And you've also been consulting to Cellmark since about the same time on their statistical methods and their databases, correct?
At about the same time, yes.
And I believe you testified that you reviewed, at the conclusion of your direct testimony, that you reviewed the statistical work done by both DOJ and Cellmark in this case. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And you said after your review of that data, it meets with your approval. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if I said those words, but I think the estimates they gave are good estimates. They follow naturally from the databases they used, yes.
Dr. Weir, when you reviewed Cellmark's work in this case, were you as careful in your evaluation and assessment of their work as you were of your own work in this case?
Objection argumented.
Sustained.
Well, Dr. Weir, were you more careful with your evaluation of the FBI's statistical work and DOJ's statistical work in this case than you were with your own statistical work in this case?
Same objection.
Sustained. Further question?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Clarke?
Would it be possible to bring something up with the court?
Bring something up with the court?
I'm sorry, no, to bring a matter before the court's attention for resolution.
With the court reporter. All right, Mr. Clarke?
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Dr. Weir, with regard to your describing the approximate frequencies or estimates for mixtures that you just spoke about with Mr. Neufeld a few moments ago,
Yes, sir.
what's your opinion about whether or not such frequencies should be placed on mixed samples?
I think they're totally misleading. They completely ignore the fact that there is a mixture. We are trying to interpret the evidence of a matching stain in a mixture. Not to take into account that it is a mixture, I think, is misleading.
All right,
Okay.
Doctor, why don't you pull the microphone a little
I'm
closer?
sorry, excuse me.
Thank you.
In particular, and let's set aside for the moment the way Mr. Neufeld asked you or had you calculate frequencies for some of these mixtures. Aside from that, what about applying a frequency to mixtures at all? How do you feel about that?
Well, it is useful we have the evidences that there's a mixed stain and the profile in the mixture matches that of known people, and it may be sufficient to stop there in saying that there's a match or a failure to exclude those people, but it is useful to say if this is an astonishing event or not. It gives us some sense of whether we should be surprised to see such a mixture.
Now, you described the fact that you had previously not testified in any other case to these approximate frequencies for mixtures. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
In this particular case, were you asked to calculate frequencies for the mixtures in these results?
Overruled.
Yes, I believed I was asked late in May to do that.
Who were you asked by?
Sustained. Sustained.
Were you in fact, well, let me rephrase that. Did you in fact calculate these frequencies for these mixtures? And I'm talking about now the stains that have more than one source, so that we're clear about which samples we're talking about.
Right.
Were you in fact asked to calculate mixtures for those frequencies as a result of a direct order of the court?
Yes, I understand I was.
Have you been previously asked by any courts or ordered by any courts to present frequencies for mixtures in any other case you've been involved in?
No, I've never been involved in a case in which there were mixed stains.
Now, I'd like to take you, Dr. Weir, if I could, to, and Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to use the glove results board for a moment. Your Honor, that's Exhibit 272B.
272B, glove results board.
And in particular, if I can draw your attention, Dr. Weir, and I don't know if you can see it, but there is at the very top.
Excuse me, may I refer to my copy? It'll be a little bit easier.
Yes, you're referring to one of those smaller Xeroxed copies
Yes, if that's convenient.
of the glove results chart.
Yes.
In particular, at the very top is an item described on the chart as inside back of wrist and back below little finger. Do you see that?
That's right, yes.
To your knowledge, is that the only mixture that you were asked to calculate a frequency for that came about as a result of testing by the Los Angeles Police Department?
Yes, and that's indirect knowledge. I think it was you who brought that to my attention. Yes.
And when were you actually, well, were you, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Were you asked by me to calculate a frequency as to that particular sample?
Yes, I was.
When did I ask you to do that?
I think it was Wednesday evening of last week.
Would that be the night before your initial testimony in this case?
That's right. I'm not sure if it was Wednesday or Thursday. It was one of those two nights.
Is that, well, let me rephrase that. Is that the only sample that you were asked to calculate a mixture frequency for from the LAPD?
Yes, it is.
Now what I'd like to turn your attention to, with the court's permission, I'd like to put up the Bronco automobile results board. Exhibit 260, Your Honor.
All right, 260, Bronco results board.
And referring you, first of all, Dr. Weir, do you have a smaller version of the Bronco results board also?
Yes, I have it in front of me.
In particular, I'd like to refer your attention to item number 31, labeled the center console. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
You have described previously that you have reported frequencies for that mixture based on the 1.2 allele being actually present. Is that right?
That's right.
You described both, I believe, last week as well as earlier today, that you, when you calculate your frequencies, calculate those numbers based on the types that the analyst reports as being present.
That's right, yes.
In that particular sample, And let's start with the results board. Does that result, in fact, indicate the 1.2 is present?
Yes, it does. Does not have the word possible or any other descriptor there. It's quite clearly there just by itself.
Did you take any steps to verify the presence of that 1.2 allele by any conversation or communication with any testing analyst?
Well, I noticed it was different from other instances where the 1.2 was written with possible. So I checked with Gary Sims.
Objection as to what Mr. Sims said.
You may continue.
I checked with Mr. Gary Sims.
All right, you check with Mr. Sims, period. Next question.
As a result of that conversation, did you then, well, let me rephrase that a little differently. As a result of that conversation, did it verify in your mind the presence of the 1.2 allele in that sample?
Objection. Assumes yes.
Full roll.
I had no doubt in my mind that Mr. Sims thought the 1.2 was there.
Sustained. That'll be stricken.
What I'm actually referring you to, if I may, Dr. Weir, is as a result of that conversation, did you then calculate, or actually let me rephrase that, did it verify in your mind that your previous calculation was appropriate?
Yes, it did.
Is it then correct that with regard to item number 31 and the frequencies that are written off to the far right, which are for both 2 contributors, 3 contributors, and 4 contributors, are then accurate?
Well, they haven't changed since Friday. So I have in my, well, maybe I should look and see what's there.
All right, if you would, in this instance.
These seem to be consistent with what we said on Friday. These results haven't changed.
In other words, there was no need, in your opinion, to change any of the numbers on item number 31 based on your conversation with Gary Sims as well as the data that had been presented to you before.
Objection as to the based on the
Full roll.
That's right.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention, Dr. Weir, if I could, to item number 29. You recall Mr. Neufeld asking you some questions towards the end or very end of his cross-examination.
Yes, I recall that.
And in particular, do you recall questions he asked you about whether or not the 1.2 allele in the sample number 29, and I'm referring to the DQ alpha results, may or may not have been present? Do you recall that question?
Yes, he was asking me that.
Now, with regard to that sample, and let's refer to the chart itself, there are actually results on item number 29 at the DQ alpha marker from 2 different laboratories. Is that right?
That's right. Both DOJ and Cellmark have results.
Let's focus initially on the Department of Justice's results. That's the uppermost of the 2 laboratories that are listed to the right of item 29.
That's right.
Those results, do they make any statement about whether or not the 1.2 allele is present?
No, it's just listed without any descriptor.
There's no language like possible?
No.
Referring you to Cellmark's results as well on that same item, is there any qualifier about the presence of the 1.2 allele for item 29?
No, there's not.
I'd like you to assume hypothetically that the analysts testified in this case that with regard to item 29, the 1.2 allele is present based on their interpretation of the data. Would your frequencies under that hypothetical that you have listed off to the right, well, let me rephrase that if I may, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Have you made a recalculation of a portion of item number 29 as far as the frequencies themselves?
A small portion of them I have, yes.
Okay. What does that relate to?
That's a different issue. It's are we allowed to multiply together all the numbers in the profile? And there's a hint of some dependence in one of the FBI's databases, their black database. So for any calculation involving black database, I'm answering too much. That refers to the polymarker. Excuse me. The DQ alpha I did not change.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's what I'd like to focus your attention on is
Excuse me.
at the moment the DQ alpha results.
Thank you. So I have not changed the DQ alpha.
in your view, as a result, and again assuming hypothetically that both analysts testified to the presence of the 1.2 allele, is there any reason that you should assume it is not present?
No.
Now, Your Honor, what I'm going to ask the witness to do is, with respect to certain calculations, we have prepared numbers in accordance with the recalculations already described by the witness, and I have magnetic boards that I would like to use with numbers already written on them.
Proceed.
Dr. Weir?
Have you shown these to Mr. Neufeld?
No, I have not.
Start with the ones that Mr. Neufeld's already had a chance to look at.
First of all, with a number of these mixtures that you described earlier today, have you had an opportunity to recalculate them over the weekend?
Yes, I have.
First of all, with regard to, and let's start initially with items 303, 304, and 305 that are from the center console of the Bronco.
Fine.
Those all actually, in your initial or original testimony about frequencies under these various possible combinations, those numbers were the same for all three of those items. Is that right?
That's right, and they'll remain so. The profiles are the same.
As far as the calculations you described in your testimony last week, did you commit an error in making those calculations?
Yes, I did.
Do you know how to calculate them properly?
Yes, I do. That's what makes me so angry with myself.
Is it the case that what you left out was the assumption that the 1.2 allele for these three samples might not be there?
As it turned out, that was, I thought I was doing it correctly, but the way I had written my computer program did not build that in properly. I thought it had, and it hadn't.
The effect of assuming that the 1.2 allele may not be there, how did that impact your calculations, if you can describe that in a simple fashion?
Well, the profiles all appear to be more common than I had reported on Friday.
Did you leave out this possibility on purpose?
No, sir. I left it out for all the profiles that involved the 1.3 and the 4. Every time I should have made this accommodation, I failed to.
Did you try to hide it when it was pointed out to you?
It was so obvious, there was no way. In fact, I've pointed out now that I did it in additional items.
If outside of court Mr. Neufeld had pointed it out to you that it was missing, would you have corrected it then?
Sustained. Calls for speculation.
Would you have included it if anyone had pointed out to you that it was missing?
Sustained. Speculation.
Would you have included it if you yourself had discovered it missing in reading your report?
Or will.
Absolutely, yes.
Have you since last week made that calculation, or those calculations for these three samples, 303, 304, and 305?
Yes, I have.
Have you also made those calculations for a few other samples that the same occurrence happened in?
That's right, I have.
Now, referring you, if I can, to what appear to be three magnetic covers labeled 303, 304, and 305. those appear to have numbers written in the same manner as what's currently on the Bronco results chart for the possibility of 2 contributors, 3 contributors, and 4 contributors. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
And do those 3 magnetic covers for items 303 through 305, do they appear to have the corrected numbers, accounting for the possibility that the 1.2 allele was not present?
Yes, they do.
All right. With the court's permission, then, I'd like to apply those to the board, bearing in mind they can be removed because they're magnetic.
Proceed.
Now, Dr. Weir, what I'm going to ask you to do is, as far as both the old and the new calculations for, and let's just take 303, do you have each of those numbers in front of you so that you don't have to try to read the board from an angle?
I have one. Let me get the other one.
Now, the original numbers reported, and I'll use 303, for the assumption of 2 contributors in the mixture was 1 in 1,400 as the most common, is that right?
That's right.
And the new approximate frequency is 1 in 570, is that right?
That's right.
How would you characterize that difference between those 2?
Well, they're different numbers, obviously. One's about a little over twice the size of the other one. They both convey the impression that the profile is not especially rare. I don't know if we have to have a particularly good, I don't know if I have a particularly good word to describe it, but it has the frequency in either the hundreds or the low thousands, whichever way we go.
Okay, the least common for 2 contributors is 1 in 18,000, is that right? And I'm referring to the frequencies you provided in court last week.
The old figures are 18,000, yes.
And is the new figure at the upper range, that is the least common, approximately 1 in 10,000?
That's right, yes.
Would your comments about the difference between 18,000 and 10,000 be consistent with what you just described about the difference at the most common number?
Yes, yes.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention, if I could, to the assumption of 3 contributors.
All right.
And when you comment about 303, your comments, do they not apply equally to 304 and 305 as well?
That's right. It's the same profile and the same numbers are going to apply.
Now, first of all, in terms of the actual results of the DNA tests themselves, there are 3 individuals in this case who are not excluded from the actual tests themselves on 303, 304, and 305. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
In other words, Mr. Simpson is not excluded,
Right,
Mr. Goldman is not excluded,
right,
and Nicole Brown is not excluded.
right.
The original frequencies that you reported for the assumption of 3 contributors last week, the more common number, or most common, was about 1 in 450. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
You have recalculated, and that new number, instead of 1 in 450, is approximately what for 3 contributors?
It's a 1 in 320.
How would you characterize the difference between 450 and 320?
Objection, I would ask that you can do it mathematically, but I would not allow them to give opinions, as the frequencies speak for themselves.
Whole world.
Well, the numbers are different. They differ by 150. That's less than a factor of 2. I think both the numbers are conveying the same sense of the frequency of this mixture of 3 genotypes.
The original number, and we'll look now at the upper end, that is the least common
All right.
frequency, for 3 contributors again, appears to read 1 in 29,000 from last week. Is that right?
That's right.
The new figure is 1 in 25,000. Is that right?
That's right.
Again, how would you characterize the differences between 29,000 and 25,000?
Again, Your Honor, Dr. Brown's expertise.
Whole world.
It's difficult to say that they would give us a different impression. They are both saying the same thing. This mixture would occur with a frequency in the thousands.
And then lastly, on the assumption of 4 contributors, the range, and perhaps we can do this a little quicker, the range that you provided us last week for the assumption again of 4 persons contributing to that mixture was between approximately 1 in 49 to 1 in 69,000. Is that right?
Right.
And the new figures provided today are between 1 in 41 to 1 in 65,000. Is that right?
That's right.
Would your comments about the differences between your original numbers and the numbers today that you described for 2 and 3 contributors be consistent with 4 also?
Yes.
Now, while we're on the results from the Bronco, if we could, have you also prepared a magnetic cover reflecting what should be or what are the approximate frequencies for 2, 3, and 4 contributors for the steering wheel item number 29?
Yes, I have.
And showing you a new magnetic cover, could you take a moment to look at those and tell us if those are in fact accurate estimates?
Yes, these are the numbers I've calculated.
And as far as the original number for 2 contributors, that was from 1 in 60 to 1 in 11,000, is that right?
That's right.
And the proper estimates would be from approximately 1 in 26 to 1 in 11,000?
Right.
As far as assuming 3 contributors, the original estimate was 1 in 9 to 1 in 3,500,
Right.
and the new one is 1 in 2 to 1 in 3,500.
Right.
And then lastly, the old or former estimate was 1 in 1 to 1 in 3,000, and now it is 1 in 1 to 1 in 1,300 approximately. Is that right?
Right.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'm going to place the 29 cover
Yes, thank you.
on the board. As far as these estimates, Dr. Weir, that you provided last week, and in some cases provided additional numbers for those samples this week, do those apply only to the mixed samples in this case?
Oh, yes. Yes, these changes were only for the mixtures.
So in other words, your comments today about differing numbers from the same item number have nothing to do with the estimates calculated by the laboratories for stains from one source.
That's correct.
Now, I'm going to return to the glove board if I may again, Your Honor.
Yes.
And referring you, if I can, Dr. Weir, to that portion of the glove labeled area G10. Do you recall that?
All right, yes.
As far as your calculations last week, was this another example where you did not consider the possibility that the 1.2 allele on that sample may not be present?
That's right, yes.
Did you perform a recalculation similarly to that you did with items 303, 304, 305?
I did.
showing you what's been labeled G10
All right.
and what appear to be frequencies or estimates for either 2 contributors or 3 contributors. Do those estimates reflect the calculations you performed over the weekend?
Yes, they do.
Now, the original numbers on area G10, on People's Exhibit 272B, were from 1 in 3,900 to 1 in 19,000,
That's right.
assuming 2 contributors.
Yes, uh-huh.
And the new numbers are 1 in 1,600 to 1 in 11,000. Is that right?
That's right.
Assuming 3 contributors, the most common number went from 1 in 4,600 last week to 1 in 3,200 today.
That's right.
And as to the rarest frequency, initially it was approximately 1 in 71,000, which is now approximately 1 in 63,000.
That's right.
Can you describe for us, how would you characterize those differences again?
Well, they're real. They're obviously different numbers. I don't think we get a different impression of their frequencies. They both have both sets tell us that the frequencies are in the hundreds to thousands.
All right, Your Honor, I'm going to place the G10 marker on 272B. Now, turning, if I can, to the glove, and I'm referring back to the first sample, that tested by the Los Angeles Police Department. In other words, what's listed as the first actual item on this chart. You understand which one I'm referring
Yes,
to?
it doesn't have an item number, but it's the first row on the chart. Yes.
In other words, we can't refer to it as G1, G2, or G anything.
That's right.
It's simply the first listed item for LAPD item number 9.
That's
Is that right?
That's right.
Did you also calculate frequencies for that particular sample as well?
I did.
And showing you what's listed as another cover, rather on which is listed frequencies for 2 or 3 contributors, do those appear to be accurate?
Yes, they do.
Perhaps you can tell us, if I just ask you to describe, can you tell us the difference between those numbers and what is currently listed on the board from your testimony last week?
Why don't I just read from the board? From last week it was 1 in 30 to 1 in 190. Did I give the new figure?
Yes.
So the 30 becomes a 14 and the 190 becomes a 60. For 3 contributors, the 1 in 6 becomes 1 in 4. The 1 in 90 becomes 1 in 180.
All right. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll apply this cover.
Yes.
And now if we can deal with 1 in a set of 3 again. With regard to G1, G2, and G4, those 3 samples contain the same set of types as far as the PCR results. Is that right?
Yes, they have the same profile, so they'll have the same numbers.
So like 303, 304, and 305, can we deal with them all as 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay, showing you covers for G1, G2, and G4. Could you take a moment to look at those 3?
Yes, they're all accurate.
Now, these recalculations were...
Excuse me, this G1, G2, and G4.
Yes.
That's right, yes.
These recalculations were made as a result of your discovery of what? That impacted the frequencies or the estimates you provided last week.
This is the same phenomenon. This is the failure to account properly for the DQ alpha type.
All right. Then let's go right to, and let's just use G1 as our example.
All right.
Can you describe for us, and let's turn to the original estimates for these mixtures on G1, or this mixture. Your original estimate for 2 contributors was approximately 1 in 600 to 1 in 11,000. Is that right?
Right.
And is it correct that for that same assumption of 2 contributors, the estimate is 1 in 240 to 1 in 6,300?
That's right.
As far as 3 contributors, your initial estimate was approximately 1 in 400 to 1 in 36,000.
Yes.
And would the new estimate for 3 contributors be 1 in 280 to 1 in 32,000?
That's right.
As far as the differences between these numbers and those described by you last week, would your comments that you made earlier be the same or apply here as well?
Yes, they would.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'm going to put the cover on each of G1, G2, and G4, but only the PCR portion.
Yes.
Dr. Weir, incidentally, as far as these magnetic covers, they can be removed to see what's underneath them. Is that right?
I understand so, yes.
In fact, it does appear that I'm able to remove them and put them back. Turning your attention now to G3 and G9. Do those two samples also go together as far as calculating these approximate frequencies for PCR mixtures as to those samples?
Yes, they do.
Let's start with G3.
All right.
Your initial calculation on G3 was approximately 1 in 3,900 to 1 in 22,000 for 2 contributors?
Yes.
And
Yes.
your new, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, I just said yes. Mhm.
And the frequencies that you have provided today, instead of 1 in 3,900, the more common would be, or most common, approximately 1 in 1,600.
That's right.
And as far as the initial calculation for the high end, assuming 2 contributors,
Right.
was originally 1 in 22,000,
Right.
and is that now approximately 1 in 12,000?
Yes.
Turning to 3 contributors, that range, as far as G3 again, was originally from 9,000 to 150,000,
Yes.
and now that range is approximately 6,500 to 229,000.
Yes.
With the court's permission, I'm going to cover again the PCR portion of G3.
Thank you.
And lastly, as to the glove, Dr. Weir, showing you what's labeled G9, these are supposed to be the same numbers as G3, is that right?
Oh, they should be, yes.
One of those numbers looks like it's actually been smudged, is that right?
It does.
Can you tell us what that number should
The
be?
number should be the same as for G3, 1 in 229,000.
Perhaps I can take a red pen and make that clearer. But that,
229,000.
so that with regard to G9, these would be the same ranges as G3, is that
That's right. They should be the same, yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to put this cover on G9 as well.
Yes.
Now, using this example, and before I put the cover on, Dr. Weir, it appears, for instance, that with regard to the assumption of 3 contributors, the calculations that you've made and described just now in court, that the upper range is even rarer than the original range that you provided for 3 contributors on this sample. Is that right?
Yes, it's just more difficult to arrive at that range. It's a little difficult to make general statements about how the numbers will come out, but it's a rarer event when I do it properly.
So in other words, it's not necessarily the case at all that when you make your calculations based on the assumption the 1.2 allele may not be present, that in fact the range may show us that's something that's even a rarer event.
Objection, it's the evidence, only the upper range.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Is it the case, Dr. Weir, that when you perform your recalculations, at least one end of the range may be rarer than the way you calculated it last week?
Yes, yes.
And lastly, Your Honor, I'd like to refer to, as far as these mixtures, to the Bundy results board.
is 78.
Yes. Dr. Weir, referring you to item number 78, and in particular the PCR portion of the frequencies off to the right of that particular item,
All right.
that's the drop from Ronald Goldman's boot. Is that right?
Right.
Did you also recalculate the possible range or estimates for the range of the characteristics from that particular item based on the PCR markers only?
I did.
And have you calculated those, and are they accurately reflected on another magnetic cover labeled item number 78 PCR?
Yes, this is accurate.
Could you tell us the original range and that reflected on the magnetic cover as well?
Let me read from the board. So from 78, we had 100 from one. Looks like your writing's worse than mine, Mr. Clarke.
It does appear bad. I didn't.
Look like 1 in 285 to 1 in 120,000. That becomes 1 in 110 to 1 in 16,000. For 3 contributors, 1 in 60 to 1 in 490,000 becomes 1 in 42 to 1 in 44,000.
Could you verify in your calculations, in fact, can you tell us whether or not the old number for 2 contributors was 1 in 285?
You just have to give me a minute. That sounds right. I need to check. Item 78 was, yes, the low end was 1 in 285.
So it is 285.
Yes,
And the new number is what?
110.
And as far as the 3 contributors, what would be the most common? In other words, if you could tell us the old and the new number as far as 3 contributors and the most common end of the range.
The old number was 1 in 61 to 1 in 490,000, and now it's 1 in 42 to 1 in 44,000.
All right, Your Honor, I'd like to put that cover on the board also. Dr. Weir, could you describe for us approximately how many calculations you've had to do in this case? And I'm referring to, and I'm having you, if you would, set aside recalculations, just the calculations you did initially.
Just on the mixtures,
Everything.
everything? I don't think so. There are many, many items of evidence on these charts. Many of them have multiple loci, and I've done a lot of things with them, so it's certainly several hundred calculations.
As far as these frequencies that you have recalculated, those involve mixtures alone, is that right?
That's right.
In terms of these frequencies on the mixtures, and on the current board, the Bundy board, item number 78 appears to be the only mixture, is that right?
I think that's right, yes.
As far as those frequencies are concerned, do they take into account in any manner any of the known types of either Mr. Simpson, Nicole Brown, or Ronald Goldman?
No, they don't. None of the calculations I do take into account the included people.
What does that mean? Can you describe what you mean by that?
Well, we have an item of evidence in a DNA profile which matches some known people, and we set that aside. We say there's a match. Well, I mean the investigation proceeds because there is a match. Having the match, once the match has been declared, that is set aside for all these calculations, and then we say Well, we have this profile. How likely is that profile if there were unknown contributors, people we don't know anything about? So all these numbers refer to the unknown people.
So in other words, your frequencies for all of these mixtures are calculated without regard to whoever they may or may not be consistent with in this case.
That's right, yes.
As far as your recalculation, well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. These calculations, not taking into account any of these known people, is that different in any way from the calculations done for a single source stain? For instance, anything but 78 on this Bundy results board.
No, the single stains are just the same. If there's a single stain that has a profile which matches a single person, that person is set aside. The calculation is done to get the chance of getting that profile type if there was an unknown contributor.
And again, going back to the mixtures, then for example, on just the PCR results alone on item number 78, when you say that if there are two contributors, the frequency is approximately 110 to 16,000, that's just looking at two contributors at random on the entire planet.
That's right.
Your Honor, I was going to shift topics. Is the court going to take a recess?
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess at this time. Please remember all my admonitions to you. We'll be in recess for about 15 minutes. All right, Dr. Weir, you can step down. And present, counsel, anything we need to take up before we ask the jurors to rejoin us?
Yes, Your Honor. Can I see the cup again?
No, you don't really want to see this. It's one of my Father's Day presents.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's all.
That's it? All right. Let's have the jurors, please. Mr. Douglas?
Your Honor, I was just given at the break 33 pages of notes, including perhaps 28 pages of handwritten notes by Ms. Susan Brockbank and a 5-page report. Messrs. Blazer and Bailey are in the back reviewing the documents, but expressed some modicum of concern at the prospect of having to cross-examine a witness today upon receiving rough notes from that witness only this afternoon.
Well, why don't we take that up as soon as we conclude with Dr. Weir, assuming we're going to conclude Dr. Weir this afternoon.
Very well.
All right. Mr. Clarke, do you have much more? No. All right. All right, let's have the jurors, please. All right, Dr. Weir, would you resume the witness stand, please? All right, Mr. Clarke.
Thank you. Dr. Weir, while we're on item number 78, if I could ask you just one or two more questions. There
All right.
were also estimates made by you of frequencies for this mixture based on the RFLP results. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And for two contributors, they ranged from 1 in 300 million to 1 in 1 trillion, approximately. Is that right?
Yes.
And for three contributors from approximately 1 in 1 million to 1 in 300 million, is that right?
Yes.
The fact that you made changes or recalculations as to the PCR estimated frequencies, do those have any effect whatsoever on the RFLP estimates?
No, they don't.
Now, I'd like to refer you, if I could, to one of the defense exhibits, and I believe it's Exhibit 1208, the drawing that Mr. Neufeld did about mixture frequencies.
The chart, yes, this morning, yes.
Do you recall that mixture frequencies chart?
Yes, I do.
I believe that is Exhibit 1208, Your Honor.
Yes.
Dr. Weir, you expressed a desire to explain one of your answers to Mr. Neufeld. What did you want to explain?
Well, I wanted to explain how to interpret a mixture. There are some mixed stains, and we would like to assign a frequency to those mixtures on the assumption they came from some people unknown to us. So we need to calculate the frequency of 2 or 3 or 4 people, however many people we think are likely to have contributed to the mixture, and if we don't know, we'll just give the range of answers. And I've been trying to think of an appropriate analogy, and I was thinking of maybe playing a slot machine where in order to win, we had to have 3 different fruits showing, a lemon, a cherry, and an orange, say. And we will win only if the whole 3 different fruits show. This just has 3 wheels on it. So what I've calculated is the frequency of getting that set of 3 fruits showing, a lemon, an orange, and a cherry.
So in your example, there's only a payoff if a lemon, a cherry, and an orange show up, one
Yes.
on each of the wheels.
That's right. The whole 3 have to be there. It doesn't matter on which wheel, but we've got to get the whole 3. Now, before we even walk into the casino, we know it's going to be a rare event. That's the way things are stacked. Anyway, this is what we have to get the whole. We need to get the whole 3. What Mr. Neufeld had me calculate was the frequency of getting some of them, either 2 of them or a 1 of them. It depended on the circumstances. 2 out of 3 doesn't pay. 1 out of 3 doesn't pay. I don't care how often an orange shows up. I've got to get orange, lemon, and cherry to pay off.
Now, how does that relate to, and there's this third column on these mixture frequencies. First of all, the first 2 columns relate to frequencies that you estimated last week and then testified to today. Is that right?
Those first 2 columns, one of them is much better than the other. They give us the frequency of the set of 3, in this case the set of DNA bands, in my example the set of 3 fruits. What Mr. Neufeld's, what the NRC's number is the chance that any of the 3 show up. Now supposing there were only 3 fruit on the wheel, all 3 are going to, and the mixture is a 3 fruit mixture, the chance of getting any one of the 3 is 100%, because those are the only 3 possible. So in some of his examples, in the polymarker examples, he said it wouldn't exclude anybody. Well, that's right. If you spin the wheels, you're going to get something showing up, so nothing is excluded. If there are more than 3 fruit on the wheel, if there's also bananas, which we don't see, then the frequencies won't be 100. But the essential thing is, this is a mixture. I think everyone has agreed it's a mixture because there's more than 2 bands that are probed. It was contributed by more than 1 person. The question is, how unusual is this mixed profile to have come about if there were more than 1 contributor? It doesn't matter how many times the cherry shows up, it's the whole 3 needed for payoff.
Then what's wrong with this column labeled NRC, where these numbers 1 in 4, 1 in 10, or 1 out of 2 are written?
It doesn't give us the frequency of the evidence. The frequency of the evidence, if there were 2 people unknown to us, or if there were 3, or if there were 4, that's what we have to calculate. It's the frequency of the evidence.
And in your view, is that third column a scientifically appropriate way of describing the relative frequencies of these mixtures?
No, it's not.
Incidentally, is there any relation between proficiency tests and whether a mistake was made in this case?
No,
No foundation.
no, there's not.
Do either proficiency tests or whether a mistake was made in this case affect your calculations at all?
No, they do not.
Now, you described, Dr. Weir, the fact that, and you expressed some reservations about being a witness for a criminal defendant. Do you recall that?
Yes, there was some conversation, yes.
Are you biased against criminal defendants?
No, I'm not.
Are you biased against this defendant in this case?
No, I'm not.
Are you biased against any criminal defendant?
No, I'm not.
Are you biased against any attorney on this case,
No,
on
sir.
either side?
No, no, sir.
As far as your testifying, is that because your university has a contract with one of the laboratories in this case?
No, I'm here as a private citizen.
Why did you agree to testify in this case?
I'm very concerned that the statistical interpretation of DNA evidence is done correctly. I've been very angry over the last 4 years at some of the statements made in courts about the statistics attached to DNA profiles. I am very anxious that they be done correctly, and I am therefore willing to testify when possible.
If a criminal defendant wanted you to present evidence about statistics or frequencies attached to either a match or mixture, using the proper scientific manner of doing so, would you so testify for that defendant?
Yes, I would if I had the time.
Dr. Weir, how much are you being paid for your work in this case?
I'm not
Beyond the scope.
I'm not being paid.
How much are you being paid for your testimony in this case?
I'm not being paid for any aspect of this case.
As far as the university is concerned, what is your status while you're out here in Los Angeles testifying?
I'm on vacation.
Now, these numbers that are presented on these boards, and we have before you, and the jury, Exhibit 259, the Bundy results boards. But let's take all 5 of the results boards into account. What are these numbers that are written up there? Are they exact numbers?
Oh, no, they're estimates of the frequency with which these various profiles would arise from unknown people.
What do numbers in the millions or billions mean?
Well, there's 2 parts to that. They convey a very real sense how rare these profiles are. I think they're very good at doing that. But specifically, numbers in the billions are a little hard to understand. We don't have experience in having to deal with numbers in the billions. The only time we see them written down anywhere is to do with the national debt. I don't think anybody understands that. So we just have these enormous numbers. They are good at saying this profile or that profile is rare. And I think when they are so rare, they're based on so many loci, I would be happy just to leave it at that.
I'd like you to direct your attention, or I'd like to have you direct your attention to a few of the stains on this board. In particular, item number 47.
Objection beyond the scope of cross-examination.
And would it help you, first of all, to use the smaller charts that you have in front of you?
Yes, it would.
I'd like to direct your attention to items 47, 48, 49, 50, 52. First of all, amongst that group, that includes PCR results, and as to 52, RFLP results as well. Is that right?
That's right.
And then lastly, 115, 116, and 117. Do you see those?
Yes.
Your Honor, objection holds beyond the scope. Numbers 1 and 2.
And 117 has RFLP results as well. Is that right?
It doesn't show on my copy of the chart. But I see it is on that, yes.
From a population genetics standpoint, as well as a statistical standpoint, what do those results tell us in terms of the evidence presented on this particular board?
Objection, no foundation. And vague as
Sustains vague.
As far as those results are concerned, do those results, results reveal a rare profile?
objection, no foundation. The numbers speak for themselves.
Overruled.
Yes, but, well, especially the RFLP frequencies when they're in the millions, that certainly indicates a rare profile.
And as far as RFLP results, are you referring now to what would be one of the Bundy walkway stains, item number 52, as well as the rear gate, item number 117?
Yes, I am.
And do those results reflect RFLP matches with any particular individual?
Mr. Simpson is not excluded from having contributed to that stain.
What can you tell us about the meaning of that evidence in terms of...
That's the meaning. It's not his province either.
Overruled.
What can you tell us, Dr. Weir, about the meaning of those pieces of evidence, and referring to the RFLP matches, from a statistical and population genetics standpoint?
Well, the statistics and population genetics is concerned only with determining how frequent that profile is in the general population in people other than in some unknown person. So the numbers represent that frequency.
As far as Mr. Simpson is concerned, is he an individual that's simply not excluded, or is this evidence from a frequency standpoint something more powerful than that?
Well, the evidence says that it's very unlikely we would see that evidentiary profile if it came from somebody else.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to put on the easel the Rockingham residence results board.
Let me see counsel with corporate.
Dr. Weir, in terms of your analysis, you examined 2 databases from Cellmark, is that right?
That's right. The one that they used in their own reports and a subsequent one developed in 1994.
And was that what was referred, I believe, last week to the 1992 Cellmark database as well as the 1994 Cellmark database?
That's right.
You also examined the FBI database. Is that correct?
Yes, the FBI's RFLP and PCR.
So in your analysis of the various databases used in this case, would it be correct to say you examined 3 separate databases?
Well, I also examined the Cellmark PCR, so it's actually 4.
Okay. So would it be 3 different RFLP databases?
Yes, if we take the 2 Cellmarks as being different, yes. Mhm.
And as far as PCR databases, how many would that include?
And for the PCR, Cellmark has the Caucasian and African American, and the FBI has the 4 racial designations.
And did you evaluate the evidence in this case on all of these results boards using and comparing all of those databases?
I didn't use the Cellmark's PCR data, but I used all the Cellmark's RFLP, all the FBI's RFLP, and all the FBI's PCR on all the items on the boards.
As a result of your comparison of those databases, is it your opinion that the RFLP results on all of these boards, where they exist, are in fact good estimates?
Yes, they are.
As far as these databases and comparing results from each of them, do they in fact demonstrate the fact that these various RFLP profiles for the 3 known individuals in this case are very rare?
Well, I'd like to rephrase that. The profiles found on the evidentiary items are very rare, and they match the 3 known people.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Neufeld?
Dr. Weir, a moment ago you said that you weren't receiving any financial rewards for testifying in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, my travel expenses are paid.
Okay. And would it be fair to say, Doctor, that sometimes people say something for money, sometimes people say something because they have a certain political agenda or a certain philosophical statement they want to get across? Is that a fair statement?
So long as you don't apply it personally, it's a fair statement.
Okay. And I believe you said a moment ago, sir, when you were describing yourself and the issues that have arisen in forensic DNA typing, you said that you've been very angry at the way these issues have been described in courts over the last several years. Is that correct?
In some instances, yes.
And I believe you also said that you were very anxious to get yourself onto the witness stand so your position could be heard by a large audience. Is that correct, sir?
I think that's overstating it a little.
Did you use the word anxious, sir, to describe your own feelings?
Anxious to present the proper analysis in general, not in this particular case.
And you feel that other people in other cases have been presenting an improper analysis, correct?
On occasions, I do.
And you also felt that the NRC report was presenting improper scientific conclusions, correct?
Fictional, vague, argumentative also.
Sustained.
Haven't you written letters to publications criticizing the NRC report?
I have criticized the errors in the report.
And haven't you gone to gatherings of scientists or forensic employees and made public statements criticizing the NRC report?
I have pointed out the errors, and by doing so, I've criticized it, yes.
Would you consider yourself as one person who has a certain philosophical or political agenda on this particular issue, sir?
No, I wouldn't.
Now, when you calculated these new numbers for the mixtures today on redirect examination for Mr. Clarke, did you take into consideration the extra step that you talked about last week, namely the FST for substructure?
I haven't completed those numbers, but I have a very good sense of what the numbers will be, because the same number of bands in the mixed profile occur in some of the single stain profiles, so the same magnitude of effects will be present.
But did you, in fact, include that calculation and that factor in the numbers that you put on this board for Mr. Clarke a little while ago?
Oh, those numbers not on for any of the profiles, no.
And sir, you also testified last week that one of the extra steps that you engage in, to be more conservative, is that you provide what's called a 99% upper confidence limit on a frequency estimate. Do you recall that?
I do.
Did you, when you did these calculations for Mr. Clarke and put on the board this afternoon, first take into consideration the 99% upper confidence limit for those numbers?
Well, you don't do it first, you do it afterwards. I haven't done it yet, but I know what the effects will be based on the comparisons I've done in similar sized profiles from the single stains.
Dr. Weir, didn't you tell this jury last week that both those steps, namely calculating the FST for substructure and providing a 99% upper confidence limit, will render the frequencies somewhat more common than the regular point estimate would? Isn't that true, sir?
I think I said it goes both ways. Certainly the upper confidence limit is in that direction.
Yes. And that the FST is also in that same direction as making it more common. Isn't that correct?
If we use a positive value, we could use a negative value as suggested by the data and go in the other direction.
But if you use the positive value and you use the 99% upper confidence limit, you will generate a frequency more common than the numbers that you just put on the board for Mr. Clarke in your redirect examination, wouldn't you?
That's true.
And didn't you also say, sir, that one of the ways that you depart from the other laboratories is that you believe both of those things should be done? Isn't that correct?
That's true.
I'm sorry.
And I haven't changed.
And in fact, even now, when you recalculated these numbers after the weekend, and you did these new numbers for Mr. Clarke, you again failed to include those two adjustments, which would render the frequencies more common than they are on that board. Isn't that correct, sir?
Objection, I think counsel's argument with this.
Sustained. Rephrase the question. It was also compound.
Sorry?
It was also compound.
Well, sir, had you made the adjustment for substructure that you've characterized before you put these numbers on the board, wouldn't that have generated frequencies more common than the ones that you put on the board?
Yes, the amount depends on the frequency itself.
But it would be more common.
The number I would present is more common. We could calculate it in both directions. We only present it one way, but of course we don't know which way the reality is, so that's true.
But when you said we only present it one way, you would present it in a way that if you had done that calculation would have made these frequencies even more common than the ones that you put up there. Isn't that right?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
That's right.
And sir, if you had been asked to put in a 99% upper confidence limit for these same mixture numbers that you put on the board for Mr. Clarke this afternoon, that too would make the frequencies more common than the ones you put on the board. Isn't that correct, sir?
The upper limits would, yes.
Yes. And you didn't do that either, correct?
I had to sleep between midnight and 5 a.m. this morning, as you know.
So when were you first asked to provide frequencies for mixtures in this case?
It was in May sometime.
Didn't you provide even a preliminary report as early as May 11th, sir?
Yes, I did.
And sir, just looking at the numbers that you just generated, what number are we up to, Your Honor? 1216? Dr. Weir, it appears from your redirect testimony that there were even more errors in your calculations than first appeared when we discussed it on cross-examination on Friday. Is that correct?
You'll have to be more specific.
Well, there were more item numbers that you had to change.
Today,
correct?
I understand. No, in fact, there was only one error. I applied all those profiles using the same computer program. There was one mistake. It affected all the profiles that we discussed.
It affected far many more profiles than we'd even discussed on Friday, correct?
Yes, and I called you last night and told you that as soon as I found out.
Okay. Now, under the new data that you just provided this afternoon to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for instance, on item 29, you express a range for two contributors from 1 in 26 all the way up to 1 in 11,306. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Check is asked and answered.
And
Call roll.
Also beyond the scope.
And on this new data, sir, that you provided on redirect examination, this range reflects one difference and one difference only, namely, it depends on the race or ethnicity of the two contributors, correct, sir?
Right.
So the profiles don't change. What you're simply saying is, depending upon the race of those contributors, the frequency of that particular profile could be anywhere from 1 in 26 in the population to 1 in 11,306. Isn't that right?
It's almost right. It's based on the four databases I used, a Caucasian, an African American, and 2 Hispanics. It could have been, for example, that I had 4 Hispanic databases and got a similar range. I don't know. So there is a difference by self-reported racial designation, and also a difference just by the sampling of different people.
Well, doctor, when you say on 4 different Hispanic databases, you're speculating because you haven't looked at 4 different Hispanic databases for these particular genetic types, have you?